It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. Thank you for joining with us. We're going to cover 4 different stories this morning, and each of them is particularly relevant in light of a number of different current events that are happening. Our first segment this morning will talk about Syria and the recent article that is out that basically clarifies how the Senate Foreign Relations Committee voted for the potential for an attack here on Syria. Turns out that the senators who voted for attack received 83% more lobby money from the defense industry than those who voted against it. And so we're going to take a look and evaluate that and understand. By the way, the kingpin there was John McCain. We'll get into that in a moment. Interesting that he's the most vocal, isn't it? The second issue, and that we're going to touch on this morning, is a website which is put out there for the DREAM Act kids who are illegal aliens in the United States, violating our borders, and how it teaches them how to lie. Now, this is a particularly discouraging turn in the sense that here we are with a group of youths who are between, 5 and 18. And this website specifically teaches them how to lie. I mean, with tips like, think up your lies beforehand. Be consistent. Even write down your lies so you don't forget it. And I got to tell you, that, to me, is the antithesis of the mentality of, irrespective of what the consequences are, as long as I get what I want, I don't really care about anybody else. I don't care who I got to step on, how many bodies I've got to bloody and bludgeon, as long as I can get to my little utopia. And that's pervasive throughout our society. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. Our third segment is the invisible border army that is pouring across our southern border, sponsored, promoted, directed by Iran. Now, yesterday I talked about this, and I talked about it in the sense that our borders are left open intentionally with the sole and exclusive purpose of allowing dangerous elements into the nation. And the specific reason for that, and we're going to get into it a little bit more, is so that these individuals will be able to, for all intents and purposes, violate our border, come in here, and do whatever it is that they do. I've been warning our listening audience about this for over a year now. The real purpose of the porosity of our border is specifically to allow these dangerous elements to cross. And that way, there aren't any false flags that are actually needed. In other words, all we've got to do is just let them do their thing while they're here. And then that gives the national government, the tyrannical organization, the gangsters in Washington, an opportunity to flex their muscle and close the steely fist of government control over Americans. Think 9/11, Patriot Act. Think Oklahoma City. Think Boston. Am I getting the point across here? In other words, the government itself doesn't even have to commit a false flag attack. I'm not saying they don't, and I'm not saying they do. I'm just pointing out that when you allow the border to be so porous that these elements can just wander straight over, and the official government knows they're doing it, that tells me that there's an ulterior motive in allowing it to occur. And I can pretty clearly draw a correlation between the ulterior motive and the need to have a stream of terror attacks domestically here in the United States that justify the existence of the NSA and the DHS and on and on and on and all the other three-letter alphabet agencies. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. Our fourth and final segment is going to relate to the brand new revelation. You know, Snowden's been trickling information out for quite some time now. And yesterday's revelation was particularly stunning in the sense that the NSA has effectively foiled all safeguards, encryption systems, SSL, which is secure socket layer, which is used for transferring financial information, credit cards, banking information, healthcare information. They violated all of that already. They've cracked it, they've coerced it, they've stolen it, they've hacked into the systems, or they've strong-armed the software developers to give them a backdoor. And we're going to talk further about that and understand a little bit more about the danger of that to Americans. So stick with us. We've got a busy morning this morning. We've got about 4 different topics we're going to cover. You'll be with me for the next 2 hours, effectively. If you're catching us live on our streaming link on our commercial breaks, simply just hit the play button again in a moment or two, and you'll come right back on. Don't leave. Don't disappear. Just ride with us for the morning. Okay, senators who backed the Syria resolution, there are actually a total of 17 or 18 on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And the breakout there was 10-7 with one voting present. He said he wanted to capture more information before he made a decision. But what's interesting is that out of the 10 votes that were yes votes, those senators received 83% more money from the lobbying of the defense contractor and the defense industry than those who voted against it. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that this is the Judas principle in obvious motion. In other words, let's go through some of the numbers because they're indicative and they're startling. The average yes vote came after an average of $72,850 in campaign money. Now this is publicly dispensed money. This isn't here's an envelope money. This is public money this is money that is publicly recorded as going into their reelection campaigns. Those who voted yes received an average of $72,850. Those who voted no received an average of $39,270. That's a significant difference. If you want a reason and another excuse why lobbying should be called what it really is, which is bribery, and should be banned from the American political scene, this is it, ladies and gentlemen. Here's how it stacks up. John McCain, the number one guy, and who's seemingly the guy who's pushing this the hardest, $176,300. That means that for all intents and purposes, he's selling out America for $176 lousy grand. It's less than he makes in a year. Dick Durbin, second in line. Now, this guy's a Democrat. And by the way, this bribery crosses party lines equally, which is another example of how the duopoly system in America has completely hijacked the concept of fair political discussion and discourse. Dick Durbin, the second highest in line, $127,000. I'm not going to mention the extra dollars. Just going to give you the rough number. So that means, for all intents and purposes, that John McCain got $50-some-odd thousand more than Dick Durbin, who was the second highest. Tim Kaine, $101,000. Bob Cardin, $80,000. Bob Corker, $70,000. Bob Menendez, Bob the child molester Menendez, $60,000. Gene Shaheen, $41,000. Jeff Flake, $26,000. By the way, how is it that Jeff Flake and John McCain, both senators from Arizona, sit on the same committee? That's a little nepotistic, if you ask me. Barbara Boxer, $24,000. Chris Coons, $19,000. The no votes, John Barrasso, he's a Republican, $86,500. Marco Rubio, $62,700. Chris Murphy, Connecticut, $59,000. Ron Johnson, $19,000. Tom Udall, $18,700. Rand Paul, $17,900. Jim Risch, $14,000. So let's understand what this really means. The biggest contributors in the collective group were Lockheed Martin, Boeing, United Technologies, and Honeywell International. Now these companies make the stealth bombers, they make the drones. Oftentimes they make the missiles themselves, like these cruise missiles. And so you understand the importance of this. Recognize what this is. A single Tomahawk cruise missile costs anywhere, depending on how it's loaded and how it's configured, of between $700 and $1.4 million. So if, for argument's sake, Obama sends off, let's say, 10 of these, that's easily $1 billion. No, I'm sorry. That would be somewhere between 10 and 15 million, excuse me. The unmanned Predator drones set us back about $4 million each. Now, these are, typical drone aircraft with surveillance capabilities as well as offensive weaponry. Here's the kicker. It cost $815,000 per year per soldier, according to the Pentagon. And this is a 2012 commitment from the Pentagon, or statement from the Pentagon. It cost $815,000 per year to pay, deploy, feed, house, and maintain each and every U.S. soldier in Afghanistan. Not counting contractors now. We're just talking about actual military. $815,000 per person. So if you take the number that the Pentagon estimated that it would take of boots on the ground to secure the Syrian chemical weaponry, we know that number to be 75,000 based on a report that was surreptitiously found the other day from the Pentagon. We'd be talking about a little over $5 billion per month for a simple 60-day or 2-month deployment. Once that deployment extends beyond a 60 or 90-day window, those numbers stretch and grow exorbitantly. And the reason that they do is because when you talk about just the logistical aspects of it, now you have to have a more permanent type installation where you've got to put up buildings and all the rest of that. And so the cost grows exponentially. What this tells us, ladies and gentlemen, is that these defense contractors stand to enrich themselves in their own coffers, corporate coffers, to such an extent that they have absolutely no trouble whatsoever donating literally millions of dollars a year to these traitors in Washington. This is over $1 million in political donations to 17 senators alone. We're not talking about, don't forget, there's 100, right? So 83 more are out there with their hand out. And they don't sit on the defense appropriations boards, but, they're still getting their cut. And what this tells us is that we are seeing such a significant compromising and level of corruption within our Senate that even if the NSA doesn't have dirt on a given individual or representative, we don't even need that. These guys are corrupting themselves, and for a pittance. They're selling out Jesus for 30 shekels of silver. 30 lousy pieces. They're going to sell a nation out, and they're going to have blood on their hands, collectively, for less than $1 million. Stunning to me. And it just shows the depth of depravity of where our nation has fallen and our alleged representatives in Congress. This, by the way, is only the Senate. And we haven't even, this doesn't even paint the same stroke across the House. At 435 members, you can bet that the numbers start tallying up very, very quickly in the defense industry. I mean, if it's $1 million just for 17 senators, imagine what it's like when you add the other 83 in. And then imagine what it's like when you factor in another 435 in the House. We're talking about some very, very significant sums of money here. And we're not talking about, this is just what they do on the campaign stuff. We're not talking about what they're, paying in terms of private bribes to Pentagon officials and, materiel coordinators and purchasing agents and, their own lobbyists, and the rest goes on and on and on and on and on. There's so much money in the industrial military complex. It is awash in money. And therefore, corruption is guaranteed to be rampant and guaranteed to be abusive of the principles of the rules of representation. When we're talking about a Senator McCain who is literally sitting there on a pot of gold, $176,000 last year alone, I got to look at that and I say, if you sat down and you did the math on that and you figured out how many young men have died so that John McCain could get reelected. And for the record, when these guys retire or don't get elected, they get to keep the money in their campaign war chests. If you don't know that, you should. When anyone running for office finishes running for office, if they have money left over, if they win, lose, or draw, it makes no difference. Or if they're in office and they retire and they've been building a kitty all this time, they're entitled to keep that money for whatever purposes they want. And they can spend it on, campaign debt, or they can spend it on themselves. They can go on trips to the Bermudas with their girlfriends if that's what they want to do with it. There's no rules. So John McCain, who probably carries a fairly consistent war chest of literally millions upon millions of dollars, has the wherewithal to retire and retain and keep that money on a personal level. And so that's why the endless fundraising. Not that they don't need it for their campaigns. They do, and they spend a lot of it on their campaigns. But when they start to see themselves coming up for the end game, as McCain must be at some point. He's not getting younger. But when you're sitting there looking at a war chest that may be anywhere from $2 to $5 or $8, maybe $10 million, there's a lot of incentive to do as you're told. And I think this is indicative of the real problem that we have in our government today. It's not that these people are compromised over ideology. They are. They drink the Kool-Aid and then they vote the way they vote, right? I broke the story the other day about that Black Caucus member who said that she would support Obama out of loyalty because she doesn't want him to lose face on this issue of Syria. Now, if you take that into consideration and you literally think about that for a moment, what she's saying is that she's willing to sacrifice American men and women, not because she believes in it, but because of an expedience that she doesn't want to see Obama lose face. That is a a damning admission. It really is. I mean, I don't know how people like this look in the mirror when they shave in the morning, or how they sleep at night, or how they can actually live with themselves. That level of deprivation and that level of insincerity and lack of integrity and honor and truth and honesty and justice is, I find that difficult to even conceive of. How someone could be so base and so low as to be willing to sacrifice the lives of our young men and women while literally standing there knowing that they are saying one thing while taking money behind their back with the other hand. To me, that is just, it's inconceivable. And I don't care, I mean, how much money do you really need? Really? I mean, they're getting paid, first of all, in the Senate, $195,000 or $192,000 a year. In the House, $172,000. So how much money do you really need? I mean, when's enough, John? And I don't believe for a minute that if you're making $192,000, you don't have investments on the side. And when this is all said and done, he can literally go out on the speaking circuit or become a talking head on MSLSD or Communist News Network or Faux News, and he can make far more money than he made as a senator. Now, he won't have the same level of power. At some point, they have to give up the power. But once they have enough money, I mean, and they've reached a point where either they feel like they run a risk of losing elected office, or their health is not well, or whatever the case may be. I mean, really, this whole thing bothers me to the point where it makes me wonder if this is really what we're fighting for, if this is what we as patriots are putting ourselves on the line for, are risking our own personal freedom. I mean, I spend an enormous amount of money doing this show out of my pocket. And it makes me wonder sometimes if I'm not trying to save a dead body. In other words, I don't think this is limited to these pigs in Washington. I think this is a system and a mindset which runs throughout our society. And I'm discouraged by it. I'm disappointed by it. I'm hurt by it. Because it tells me that all the effort and time and energy and money and focus and risk that I put out to try to awaken and raise, the understanding of Americans is for a corrupted purpose. Okay, we're going to take a break. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host this morning. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can also find us at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And you can find this and every other program that we do at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. Basically, remember America's Voice Now, and you can find us anywhere. We're going to take a break. If you're watching us live on our video stream, just give it a minute or so after the video ends and hit the play button. You'll be right back on with us. We'll be back in just a moment.